One of the worst things about racism is what it does to young people. Alvin A. 1865, the year the Civil War ended, was to be a time of joy and love, for the Union had just won the war, and the South was to continue being a part of the United States. The Reconstruction era had begun. Reconstruction was to be a time of rebuilding after the fighting and hate the war had caused. Soldiers were grateful to be home with their families, and the families to be home with their soldiers. Reconstruction was to be a time to solve the arguments that caused the Civil War. Then, in 1867, Rutherford B. Hayes, a Republican, was elected to become the United States President by winning the Electoral College vote and not the majority vote. This caused a great upheaval in the states, especially in the South. It was so bad, people feared that their days in Reconstruction would soon end and the brawling would resume. At that time, troops were stationed in the southern states, adding to the residents' frustration. But for the North, it also added leverage for a deal. Both the North and South came to an agreement. The North withdrew the troops and granted home rule, and Rutherford B. Hayes was inaugurated as President of the United States. The Compromise of 1877, when Rutherford B. Hayes was elected president and caused an upheaval in the South, was a failed compromise that led to conflict. The North compromising with the South ended Reconstruction along with granting home rule and pulling out troops in the South, and was supposed to bring about a more consolidated and tranquil Commonwealth, but instead it introduced the Jim Crow laws and segregation. This has impacted the world today because of events like the Charlottesville violent protests that occurred in August of 2017 and police brutality that still remains in society. A compromise is a settlement by which each side gets what neither side wanted. Evan Asar. The Compromise of 1877 was an arrangement between the radical Republicans and the Democrats. It was an unwritten document that allegedly settled the dispute that the election of 1876 caused. This was assumed to conclude Reconstruction and appease both positions in the dispute. When Rutherford B. Hayes was voted in, the Democrats were distraught and rejected the idea of allowing him in office. The Democrats brought up a proposal to the radical Republicans, a political group that focused on the equality between races and the punishment of Confederate leaders, that if the North would agree to pull out soldiers in the South and grant home rule, the rule of a region by its citizens and local affairs, the South would allow Hayes to become president and ensure rights for African Americans under the Constitution. The North eventually acceded to these conditions. This officially ended Reconstruction, and the founders of this compromise expected the country to concur. The compromise was supposed to end the unsettlement in the country. This compromise was created with the foundation of purpose to resolve the conflict and have a whole country rather than two parts of one. This is a compromise that led to conflict. In this country, American means white. Everybody else has to hyphenate. Toni Morrison. The Compromise of 1877 led to conflict in America. After Reconstruction, certain laws were introduced that segregated people of color and white people. These laws prohibited black men and women from drinking from the same water fountains, eating at the same restaurants, and even using the same bathroom as white people. A black man could not offer to shake hands with a white man because it meant that they were socially equal. These utterly racist and immoral rules were termed the Jim Crow laws, named after show characters that painted their faces black and exaggerated the features of a black person and often mocked black citizens.
Lady, let that be a lesson to you.
What's the matter with you boys shooting up that man's hen house?
I'll shoot any chicken trying to follow me home.
Wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about, I jump Jim Crow.
The Jim Crow laws were first enforced in 1877 until the 1950s. These started right after the Compromise of 1877, once the Reconstruction era had come to a close. There is a strict racial system made up to separate the people of color from the white. At all times, they had to abide with these laws. The government had complete control on the daily life of these citizens. They had put in place special segregated libraries, schools, parks, restrooms, drinking fountains, restaurants, buses, and trains. Multiple signs were hung up all over the towns as a constant reminder of the segregation between black and white, and constant racial order was demanded more and more. The government had complete control on the daily life of these citizens, and multiple times were the laws between the whites and black debated about in court to come upon a mutual agreement. This is a big problem in the United States. It didn't cease until the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s. The Compromise of 1877 led to the passing of Reconstruction and the birth of a heinous time period full of inequality, pain, and more clashing between sides in the nation. We've got to face the fact that some people say you fight fire best with fire, but we say you put fire out best with water. We say you don't fight racism with racism, we're gonna fight racism with solidarity. Fred Hampton. The Compromise of 1877 also led to some long-term consequences. The violent protest in Charlottesville was a racist gathering of neo-Nazis that soon turned into a violent outbreak. On August 12th, protesters marched down streets at a Unite the Right gathering, hauling lit torches, chanting slogans like "White Lives Matter" and "Blood and Soil," a Nazi slogan stating that ethnicity is solely based on blood and the majority race remains superior. The town declared a state of emergency. Hours later, a counter-protest was held by anti-racists in Charlottesville when a white supremacist plowed through the crowd, killing a 32-year-old woman and injuring 19 others. At 1:42 p.m., James Alex Fields Jr., who came all the way from Ohio, was charged with second-degree murder, 3 counts of malicious wounding, and 1 count of hit and run. James's teacher from his freshman year, Mr. Weimer, claimed that James had written an essay for class that was very much along the party lines of the neo-Nazi movement. There are also reports of police brutality in America. There have been multiple accusations of law enforcement abusing their power, harming, and in some cases even killing citizens who had done nothing wrong.
Authorities have released dashcam video revealing the chilling moments that led to a police officer shooting and killing Philando Castile during a traffic stop last year in Minnesota. The video comes just 4 days after a jury found the police officer not guilty of manslaughter.
You have a license for insurance? I do have a firearm. Okay. Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
Marched to a gas station and was saying outside of the gas station holding hands. The police, they were in full military gear, and the front line started beating their batons against their shield, slowly all at the same time to intimidate you. And once they get upon us, the side group pepper sprays everyone. And that pushed everyone to run away from the protesters. And so that L shape locked in and locked us against the wall. And so we were surrounded by the police. I was holding hands to someone next to me, and all I would see is they would get pulled away. He took the baton, he kind of thrust it in between my legs to kind of pull me away from people. He punched me in my head, he pulled me by my hair, and then 4 police officers jumped on my back to put the zip ties on me. And I'm screaming, I can't breathe, this is too much. And then I was arrested, and I was held in jail for overnight into the next day, which was an illegal arrest because we had not broken the law. Police told the media that we threw sticks at them, even though there are no sticks around the gas station, so that they could justify how they treated us.
This discrimination mostly happens to those who are Black, but Hispanics and Asians can also be victim to racial profiling. Black Lives Matter is an international movement that focuses on justice for Black citizens and fights police violence and systematic racism. The purpose of a compromise is to police both sides and result in less division and fighting. The Compromise of 1877 had a negative impact on America's history and had some long-term repercussions. It's not our differences that divide us. It's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. Audre Lorde. The Compromise of 1877 was supposed to benefit America, but instead brought conflict. It was a compromise that led to conflict, though it's usually supposed to end the other way around. This event led to several negative, long and short-term consequences like the Jim Crow laws, police brutality, and the violent protests in Charlottesville. Compromises are thought to solve things, but the United States is far from without conflict. Racism is still prominent, and it's not getting better. The theme is supposed to show us how people in history were able to solve conflicts with a compromise. But this theme has shown how some compromises can lead to conflict, and how America, as a country, needs to work together to put an end to the conflict and get to the root of the problem rather than keep burying it under the soil. The goal is that one day, liberty and justice for all will finally hold true.